Welcome to the Daily Horror Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, bringing you daily reviews of currently streaming horror movies for your twisted pleasure. Be aware that these reviews may include mild spoilers. And as always, I hope you enjoy.
Honestly, if this was a horror movie, I'd be one of the first ones to get killed.
Cue the creepy dude in the mask.
Like I said. But actually, it turns out
Where am I?
I didn't get killed.
Oh my god, why do I sound like that?
I woke up in the killer's body.
The Blissfield Butcher strikes again.
Don't freak out. You're black! I'm gay! We are so dead! Ow! Will you stop? It's me, it's Millie! I have like less than 6 hours to swap back or I'm gonna be stuck in this body forever.
If you asked me at the beginning of the year if I was interested in a horror comedy-centric take on Freaky Friday starring Vince Vaughn, I'd probably perform a quick concussion protocol test on you. I mean, it's not exactly a premise you can't not roll your eyes at a bit. I'm also not the biggest fan of horror comedies, given their tendency to lean too much into either their horror or comedy influence. A lack of balancing these two influences always has me asking the question, why didn't you just make a comedy or a horror movie instead? Also, if I'm being honest, Vince Vaughn being billed just doesn't jump off the marquee, as it once perhaps did for me. It wasn't Freaky's premise that was the draw for me, but rather it was writer and director Christopher Landon's ability to craft memorable horror moments within the confines of a comedy that I put my faith in. Landon, of course, being behind the Happy Death Day films, the satirical horror take on Groundhog Day's time loop, paired with the slasher that was a fun and fresh take on the horror comedy genre. So with this in mind, and pairing with the fact that Freaky was upgrading from Happy Death Day's PG-13 to a hard R rating, I decided to give it a stab. Directed by Christopher Landon and co-written by Michael Kennedy, Freaky, which is currently streaming on video-on-demand platforms, is a ton of outrageous body-swapping slasher fun. Loner high schooler Millie Kessler, played by Katherine Newton, spends her days trying to fly under the radar at her cliquey high school while grappling with the grief of losing her dad. But Millie's grief has to be put on hold when her town of Blissfield falls into the crosshairs of the supposed urban legend, the Blissfield Butcher, played by Vince Vaughn, a notorious serial killer. Millie finds herself moments from being on the Butcher's chopping block, but when he stabs her with a mystical dagger, the two swap bodies. Millie being in the Butcher's body and the Butcher being in Millie's. Now, Millie, aided by her two friends Nyla and Josh, has 24 hours to swap her identity with the Butcher before their body swap becomes permanent. On paper, this is a blatant slasher take on the Freaky Friday formula, but the ways in which Landon and Kennedy capitalize on their clear inspiration are what make this a wildly fun and bloody horror comedy. For starters, the creative duo absolutely deliver on the horror and slasher-centric kills of the film. This is a big deal in my book. More often than not, horror comedies skimp on these kills to a degree I lament a la The Godfather. Look at how they massacred my genre. Okay, that was a bit dramatic. Though not as dramatic and strong of an opening as Freaky has though, which explodes into a full-on mini Friday the 13th-esque intro. The Butcher being considered an urban legend, his hunting teens, the mask, yeah, you could say the Butcher is heavily inspired by Jason Voorhees. I mean, the film was originally titled Freaky Friday the 13th, and while I'm glad they cut the film's title down to just Freaky, we do get a rad Freaky Friday the 13th splash screen effect early on. So yes, the Butcher's looks influence is plain as day, but Landon and Kennedy ensured that he walks the proverbial slasher walk as well. Before even delving into the lead performances, which are great, and the humor, which hits more often than not, Freaky does right by its horror influence in a way few horror comedies do. Kills that are right at home in any slasher that pulls no punches. And now for a brief intermission. If you've been enjoying this episode of Daily Horror Habit, please take a moment to subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform or leaving a review on iTunes. And thank you for your continued support, which drives the show's success. And now, without further ado, let's get back to today's horrifying episode. The opening kills unfold with the Butcher stalking a group of teens around a mansion is nothing short of fantastic. Kills that would be right at home in a straight-up slasher. No holding back on gore or choreography in the name of humor. In a shocking first kill of the film, the Butcher slams a wine bottle down an unsuspecting teen's throat, punching it and having their neck explode into a geyser of shards of glass and blood. To say this made me perk up and readjust my expectations for Freaky immediately would be an understatement. The Butcher then goes on to unleash a flurry of sudden, brutal, and creative kills that feel like actual horror kills. They aren't a cheesy afterthought or just there to have the illusion of it being a horror film. Whether it's freezing a student in a cryotherapy tank and seeing their frozen body smashed to 1,000 pieces, or decapitating a rapey jock with a chainsaw, Freaky is here to play in a big and bloody way. It helps that the duo of Kathryn Newton and Vince Vaughn sell every stab, scream, and laugh with a level of gusto and tenacity that would surprise you. Given they're embodying one another's characters in their respective bodies, this is largely where the film's humor derives from, especially while Vaughn is acting as a host for Millie. Millie having to contend with her new appearance as a disheveled, 50-something-year-old serial killer makes normal situations problematic, such as scaring the shit out of acquaintances who don't recognize her new appearance. Or Millie rightfully freaking the fuck out when she awakens in the butcher's lair, which is covered in mutilated mannequins, which was absolutely hilarious. On the inverse, Millie acting as a host to the butcher, who is constantly a moment away from killing anyone they're left in the room with for more than a moment. Her transition from being this shy and sympathetic high schooler to stabbing her abusive woodshop teacher in the throat with a screwdriver before literally sawing him in half, being the bloody and ridiculous inverse to Vaughn's performance. There's also the butcher using Millie's body to blend in plain sight, which is, pretty ideal for a serial killer. Both actors do a great job of facilitating the opposite ends of the body swapping spectrum. For the most part, Freaky's humor worked for me because it plays to the predicaments of the characters who a body swapped find themselves in. Yes, there are a handful of jokes that amount to cheap throwaways, one punchline literally being, "I'll suck your dick," though these instances are either preceded by a great kill or a joke with more substance. And, to the film's credit, it's paced so well that it never becomes dull, even if you might roll your eyes at a joke or two. Freaky also does a great job at nestling horror Easter eggs and taking jabs at the genre throughout. Whether it's Millie's crush's last name being Strode, as in Laurie Strode from John Carpenter's Halloween, or an entire gag where Vince Vaughn has to wear a rubber Halloween mask and constantly complains about how he can't see shit out of it, the film doesn't shy away from wearing its influence and love of the genre on its sleeve. Every year there's a film that reminds me that preconceived notions are mostly bullshit. Freaky is that film for me. Seeing Landon flourish his humor and horror violence in an R-rated film is a gruesome treat, and the unexpected duo of Vince Vaughn and Kathryn Newton sells Freaky's lunacy with a confidence I was not prepared for. If you're ever wary of horror comedies, Freaky is absolutely one you should give a shot, as it delivers in more ways than one. This is one video-on-demand offering you don't have to think twice about. And that'll do it for another episode of Daily Horror Habit. I'll see you guys tomorrow for another Daily Horror Movie Review. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Daily Horror Habit on your preferred streaming service and follow @Daily Horror Habit on Instagram and @Daily Horror Pod on Twitter.